Hi, welcome to Eastern Wellness with Dr. Sufei Kime. Eastern Wellness with Dr. Kime is a weekly podcast meant for anyone looking for ways to improve the quality of their life, regardless of their current health status. Eastern Wellness with Dr. Kime covers a variety of different health and wellness topics like nutrition, sleep, exercise, toxins, emotional health, and so much more. Dr. Kime interviews health experts about tips, techniques, and trends in wellness, as well as regular people who have their own wellness pearls to share. For more health and wellness tips and resources, visit Dr. Sufei Kime's YouTube channel, and that's Dr. Sufei Kime, SHUFEI KIME. Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Priscilla. This is our second podcast. Our first was entitled Classic Girl. Would you briefly describe our first podcast to introduce yourself to our audience?
I'll be happy to, Dr. Kime. My name is Priscilla Nieman. I was raised in rural Iowa. I was raised in a closet. I spent most of my toddler years in a closet. I endured all types of abuse throughout my childhood. My mistake was I thought my story would be believed by healthcare providers. It wasn't. So it's been a long, long journey for healing and health. I was also introduced to alcohol by the predators. So I have been alcoholic since I've been a small child. I also was purposefully starved. So I do deal with weight issues honestly. In addition, I was forced to do chores around the house that I was developmentally incapable of doing, but I did them anyway. And somehow I survived. And I want to get my survival story out to everyone, and I want to tell them about my healing journey. So everyone, please go to our first podcast for more details. Today, we're going to talk about something else.
Yeah, we also have that first podcast in the YouTube as well too.
Yes.
Yeah. So I got to ask you my first question for you. Why do you think you survived?
I think that's an interesting question. I think it's probably complicated at the genetic level and the cellular level, but this is why I think I survived. Human beings are hardwired to survive. How did I as a little girl know that? I don't know. That's just part of being human. But I think there's a stubborn streak in me that says, these people aren't going to kill me. I had a little brother that I had to protect. These people are not going to kill that little boy who was just all over the place. He was an immature boy, and he was just all over the place. He did not know how to protect himself from predators. So our parents. So I did the best I could to protect him. And I believe that changed my genetics. My having a purpose by grade 3, that my job was to protect that little boy, and my job was to keep myself alive. But all the time, children are hardwired to please their adults. They know that they are dependent on them for survival. So I was always trying to figure out how to please my parents and how to make them love me. And that was a journey that I never succeeded at. And finally, at some point, I just said, I'll just do all of the work. I'll try to get good grades in school. I sewed, so I always tried to look nice. If you come from an abusive home, you never can show it physically, what you look like. You have to cover that up. You have to cover it up with pretty clothing, pretty jewelry. You have to cover it up with a fake smile. So I think all of that led to a real deep down stubbornness streak in me that no one's going to kill me. I am going to live, and I'm going to keep my little brother alive. And someday maybe somebody can explore my genetics and see if there is a genetic basis for this, because I think there is. I don't think we've lost too many people sometimes to outright homicide. There was nothing that the survivor could, the victim could have done. It was outright homicide. But what on earth kept me alive during all, through the beatings, through the starvation, through the closet years, through the constant intimidation.
How many years?
It was 2 years in the closet, off and on. It was not solid, because I remember riding my little tricycle to the teddy bear picnic, riding in the hallways to the teddy bear picnic, and then all of a sudden I'd end up in darkness. And I remember me screaming and crying, "Let me out, let me out, Mommy, let me out." So, those words are permanently imprinted on my body, because I was scared of the dark. And I was scared of the dark most of my life, because that's all I knew as a toddler. And I knew that a certain amount of healing happened when the other day I found a picture of me when I was 4 years old. And I had my female ancestor sewed. That's where I learned how to sew. She had me in a beautiful dress, and I was sitting on the grass in front of our house. But there was no smile. There was no 4-year-old smile. There was no impishness in those dancing eyes that I have. It was all gone by 4. And I went to her and I picked her up and I told her how much I loved her. And that though it took me a lifetime to save her, I finally did. And I'm so proud that she and I are finally united. But it's that stubbornness in me. It's that sense of hope and that sense of obligation. I also probably misconstrued some of the stuff about religion. The persecution of the Christians. I think I sometimes imagine myself as somebody who is being persecuted. A false narrative that I took forward was turning the other cheek. That's all I had no choice but to do that as a child, as a teenager. But as an adult, that needed to be rewired. That, I didn't want to live in hatred or anger or in any kind of vengeful mode, but I did have to learn to protect myself and my own personal boundaries, and that I did not learn how to do.
So don't you say one of the doctor who changed your life, say the psychologist, or you say how he cannot understand how do you survive? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
My EEG neurofeedback specialist is also a doctorate in marriage and family therapy. He also teaches marriage and family therapy at a local university. So he has changed the trauma-informed curriculum based on my case. But he's also an Episcopalian priest. So we talked about, the kinds of things that religious education does. It's sort of meant to kind of manage society.
So what did he say about the average of the life expectancy?
Well, he said that I should have been dead by 40.
Why?
Generally speaking, people with an adverse childhood experience survey of 6 or above die 20 to 30 years before a regular lifespan. So I should have been dead by 40. Now, I could have died because I was in the hospital ER a couple times with overdose.
Oh.
But I did get there in time. But of course, I didn't know what to do with substance abuse disorder. I did not know what to do with trauma. I think in so many ways I was fighting to exist, but exist. Now, the other side of that is that I'm well educated. I trained to be a teacher. I trained to be an elementary school counselor. And then when the laws drastically changed regarding special education, I trained to be a school psychologist, because I knew if children weren't tested, they never would get into special education classes, which they desperately needed. So there's that side of me too who is driven, absolutely driven for education and service. And I thought that almost every course I took or every degree I got would make me smarter in terms of living. Mm-hmm. It made me smarter in terms of certain amount of book learning.
Yeah.
And certainly the experiences, probably helped me survive today because now I'm doing very technical medical care.
So, where do you get such hope?
That was the big one that my EEG neurofeedback specialist asked me. He said, there is absolutely no reason why you should have the hope that you have. And I reflected on that a few seconds, and I said, I think there's probably a genetic basis to that too. But I gave him an example, which I will share with you right now. When I was in 5th grade, I made a scrapbook for myself and my little brother, who was 2.5 years younger than me. And I still have this. At one point, I almost threw them away, but I still have it. In there are little 5th grade writings under the pictures of love and hope. And there was no reason that 5th grade girl should have had love and hope, given the abuse she was experiencing on a daily basis. But it's all there, little writings of love and hope.
Wow.
I know.
So, what do you think? Why your parents did that?
I think the best explanation I've ever heard, 2 of them. We know this exists in the human community, that, some children are abused, some children are neglected, some children are outright abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
Why they were the way they were had something to do with their genetics, but most likely whatever happened to them around age 3. In our early years, we have too many brain cells. So approximately at age 3, we start pruning them out. And I would suspect that what turned them into predators had something to do with that period in their lives. What they were experiencing, how they were interpreting their environment. I know my female ancestor came from an abusive background. My male ancestor came from a home of a violent alcoholic father. My stepmale ancestor, he was the only child, and all I know about him is he had a horrific fever at age 5. And they just got him, they had to take him by sleigh to the hospital. And they just got there in time to save his life. He had a horrific anger disorder. I suspect he might have been bipolar. He was not alcoholic. He chose not to drink. He didn't like the stuff. So, it's all of this stuff rolled into one that probably a criminologist could explain better than me. But what I go with is what I heard a criminal anthropologist, kind of a forensic anthropologist, say at the end of a documentary once. He said, human beings have big brains. That means there's more room for things to go wrong.
Wow.
And that gave me a picture, a snapshot of how to kind of explain why my parents were the way they were. Because all my life I had tried to make them love me. And at some point I just didn't give a damn.
So what do you think, why you want to share your story right now?
Oh gosh, I have found help. And when all hope was really almost gone, I experienced a home invasion in 1994. That story wasn't believed either. But somehow I survived. And I survived months of terrorism afterwards. And came fleeing back to Iowa, which was kind of an irrational choice, except it's never irrational to save your life. And I want to make that very clear to everybody. It is never irrational to save your life. And I don't care what your past includes. We want you alive. We don't want you dead. And I have gone through 8 years of amazing treatment. Sometimes I didn't think I was smart enough to do it. Sometimes I didn't think I had enough brain matter left. Sometimes I didn't think I had enough oomph left, but I did. And I want to share this journey with everyone because out of everything I've done the last 8 years, the people can go in and review it and pick and choose what might work for them. Providers can review my case and then review their own trauma-informed care protocols and decide what will work for some of their patients and what might not.
So why this is so important for you?
I think I've been always hardwired for this. I think, trying to save my little brother, which was a very unrealistic expectation of a small child.
Mm-hmm.
But I was determined. And obviously I was determined to save myself too. I was determined to get to college. And my female ancestor tried to get me kicked out of college all the time.
How?
She would always write the dean of women to report misbehavior, that she wasn't going to pay for it. Or one semester, my girlfriend and I lived off campus illegally because we couldn't afford the dorms anymore. Then when I told her, she informed the dean and tried to get me kicked out of college again.
Wow.
So she just had a lot of issues. She was hardwired with hatred. She kind of relived her miserable childhood all the time and took it out on all of us.
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing I was always afraid of, is that I would take out what I had been through on others. And in a certain way you do if you have substance abuse disorder. You destroy yourself. But you also just, do a lot of harm to those around you.
So, did you forgive your parents?
I think it's not necessarily forgiveness. I think it's more acceptance. Just accepting that they were very deranged people. That everyday people do not harm their offspring. They may not do the right things all the time, but they nurture and protect them the best they can. So I've moved more into just the acceptance part, that they had some serious things wrong in their brains that made them the way they were. And that, maybe nothing could have saved them. One committed suicide when I was 16, and that was a very traumatic experience for me because I had to plan the funeral. And, I had to deal with the aftermath of that.
You mean your father?
Stepfather. Mm-hmm.
Stepfather.
Committed suicide when I was 16.
So,
Killed himself.
oh,
He left us with a lot of debt. But he left us with a very violent woman. And her violence escalated even more.
so your mom is worse than your step.
Oh yeah, she was the one with the anger disorder.
Okay.
I often wondered why she could bring two pedophiles into her life, but who else? She was very attractive and very seductive. Who else would end up being tricked into marrying someone who she hated her husband as much as she hated me? So, it was a mutual hatred society. And I think in many ways, I was expected to be the adult, especially like my stepfather, who was a pedophile. I was expected not only to be his victim, but to be sort of his adult companion, his companion, to help him figure out life in general, but why, how to survive her. So, it was very dysfunctional all the way around. I had way too many people to take care of.
Yeah.
And, it was a Donnybrook all the time. And then the amazing thing is, you have to get up in the morning, put your clothes on, and go to school. Now, another thing that saved me was my love of school.
Awesome.
I just love school. And it's very interesting because I was bullied a lot because children of abuse are frequent targets of bullying.
Why can't you ask help?
Back then, you really couldn't. Remember, I graduated from high school in 1967. Back then, you couldn't really ask for help. Also, you're threatened by your parents. We were threatened all the time. Do not talk about what goes on at home. Whatever happens in school, you will get, and that was something that many of baby boomers were raised with. Whatever happens in school, you're going to get it twice as bad at home. Because there was this compliance back then about school people being the right people, church people being the right.
Okay.
But theirs was a different layer. They threatened us. You do not talk about what goes on at home. Also, it's all your fault. So why would I go to someone and tell them that it's all my fault?
Because you have been conditioned.
Yeah, conditioned. And to this day, children from abuse frequently do not report it. And that's evolutionary too. We know we need our parents to survive.
So what do you want to do what's your purpose to share your story?
To share it and give people hope, this unusual hope that I have. I want to pass that on to others. But the other part is to talk about the treatments that I've been doing.
Yeah.
And they are very complicated, and some of them are very expensive. But I also think we need to know that they do exist. Because how are we ever going to change trauma-informed care protocols if we don't know everything that's out there? We also have problems with, training staff, of course. We also have problems with finance. What is covered by insurance and what isn't. And this is something that I do explain to people. My ancestors were capable of making money. They did leave me a small inheritance, and that money is used for my health care the last 8 years. So it's an ironic source of money.
Yeah.
That the predators, their money, that they were good at making. They were hard workers. I will not take that away from them. They were hard workers. That money is being used to not only save my life, but to give me a thriving life. So that's the ironies of my story. But there are ironies throughout life.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just my particular ones. But I do want people to know, at least in brief, the kinds of things that I've been doing the last 8 years.
Got you. So how about let's take 1 minute break.
That's great.
Welcome back. So tell me, what are your successful treatments?
The miracle of my life, and there's many miracles, I shouldn't say one, but I was diagnosed with celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition where you have a reaction to gluten. I was diagnosed and I got gluten out of my brain.
So when was that?
That was probably about 15 years ago.
Okay.
I was heavily traumatized from the home invasion. I was still in active addiction.
So were you in Iowa then?
Yes, I was in Iowa. And thank goodness I found a doctor who chose to diagnose me even though I was traumatized and even though I was heavily addicted. Celiac disease. I had to get gluten out of my system. I got gluten out of my brain. I stopped seizing. I stopped experiencing psychosis. And I was able to listen to all kinds of documentaries on trauma, on endocrine system, on the HPA axis, the gut-brain connection, food in general, inflammation, PTSD, military PTSD versus complex PTSD, which is what I have. Adult children of abuse have complex PTSD. I was able to put all of that together in a package. I decided, Priscilla, you've been wrong all your life. You chose the wrong providers. You've got to get yourself off of alcohol and drugs, and you've got to get yourself off of any type of psych med. And I went along for a while, 4.5 years.
How many med do you have, the psych med?
I had psych meds as
How
well.
How many?
I can't remember the exact amount.
1, 2?
Or several.
Several.
Mood elevators, tranquilizers, anti-seizure drugs. I had celiac disease, not seizures.
Got you. So, when did the journey start? Like how many years ago? It's 15 years ago you had the trauma. So did you find your doctor right away?
No. The home invasion happened in 1994. So I walked around in.
So that was in Iowa?
That was in West Virginia where I was living at the time.
Okay.
That story was not believed.
Okay.
And there was nightly terrorism for a while. Even though I survived the initial attack, there was nightly terrorism.
So why don't you think he just one or
several people?
Why did they not kill you?
We don't know because the only people I did know briefly 20 years prior to that incident were connected with healthcare. So maybe they knew that if they would just seriously injure me and seriously damage me. That,
wait, what do you mean? I don't understand that.
I don't understand it either. because the people who were responsible for the attack, I had known them very briefly my first year in the Ohio River Valley.
Okay, so you know the people.
I don't know most of them. I only knew them briefly.
So
They were kind of the ringleaders.
So the people attack you. How many people attack you?
It was a couple and their adult sons. I knew them, their sons, when they were small children, but just briefly.
Okay.
Then the whole host of other people that they brought with them, I did not know.
Wait, how many people?
I don't remember exactly, but it was several.
Okay. So you cannot remember because you try to wipe out the memory, or because you were.
I was pretty sick. I was on home health care, so I was very sick.
So you were under the med.
Yeah, under the influence too of meds.
Okay.
And what was happening is there was this strange, high-pitched whistle sound coming in.
Okay.
And because I never had treatment for PTSD, I'm and remain pretty sensitive to sound. Also, that paranoia I had by that time was pretty strong. Because remember, active addiction does not serve anybody. And, I didn't know enough to stay home until I got so sick and tired of myself that I actually, because I was always putting myself in danger. As long as I was in active addiction, I was putting myself in danger.
Because usually in psychology, it say if it happened just because your previous experience.
Yeah.
So when things happen again, you just cannot protect yourself.
Right. And I looked for love in all the wrong places. That was a song from a film that came out in the 80s, or Urban Cowboy. I did all of the some of this stuff I'm not very proud of, but it is part of my journey, and I'm no longer ashamed of it. Some of the stuff that I did in active addiction certainly did not serve me.
Okay.
But at least I did stay alive.
Yeah, but that's not your fault because
No.
it's so much.
When I picked up that little girl who was sitting in the lawn,
Yeah.
I finally acknowledged that I was just somebody trying to survive an unrealistic, it was real, it was happening, but an overwhelming situation that I never ever was capable of doing except for that little survival instinct in me.
Yeah.
So I have finally, some of that stuff still bothers me a little in flashbacks, but I have finally forgiven myself. And now I celebrate that little girl and me who kept me alive. And we found a functional medicine doctor who chose to listen to my story and go to work, because I would not be alive today. Find out about celiac disease. Again, educate myself.
Mm-hmm.
But if I hadn't found that functional medicine doctor to do all the stuff I didn't know how to do,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be here.
So how many years ago?
That was 8 years. It's actually 8 years. It's 9 years this month that I walked into this person's office.
So from 15 years ago, the home invasion.
That's when, the home invasion happened in 1994. When I found out I had celiac disease, that's 15 years ago.
Okay.
So, I walked around in deep trauma for many years.
Yeah.
Many times I wouldn't leave the apartment without a home health aide. And this is something I am sad about, is sometimes those home health aides I didn't treat very well because I couldn't tell the difference between whether or not they were a predator or a helper.
Because with your previous history, you are
Yeah.
so scared.
And I'm so sorry for some of them I've run into, and I apologize. And they said, "Oh no, Priscilla, you were the kindest person we ever met. And my son loved you. I guess I would hire the kids to clean out my car." And this one woman told me, "No, my son loved you. He thought you were the kindest person he had ever met." But that's a nice story.
Yeah.
She said, "All we did is we knew something terrible had happened, and we wanted you to get better more than anything."
Mm-hmm.
But there were other home health aides that I did not treat very well because, again, I couldn't tell the difference between who was going to harm me and who wasn't.
So tell me, I want you to share a little bit, you told me, right now you can live your life, you can see the color, you can see the flower, you can go outside, you can see enjoy the tree, the nature. Tell me about that.
Okay.
What's the difference between this 8 year and then the previous?
What it was is, this is something my functional medicine doctor and I found, that I wasn't doing as well as we had hoped, so we did some additional genetic testing. Well, here I have homozygous genetic defects affecting vitamins A, E, C, and D. Yeah, and you know, A and E are essential to good vision.
Okay.
Absolutely essential. And I was starting a neural vision rehab at the time. I had gotten influenza A, and unbeknownst to me, influenza A can take out your peripheral vision.
Oh.
So I couldn't see, you know, my visual, I had had a year previously of neural vision training and had improved a little bit, but then I got influenza A. The ironies of life, you know, and found out that that can affect your peripheral vision. So I was sent to another city for intensive neural vision rehab. And that in conjunction with fixing those homozygous genetic defects. Now that took 20 months. That was a lot of intensive treatment. The treatment was an hour away. I went to 2 sessions of 12-day light therapies, where I went every day for 12 days. And then I went twice a week for 20 months. And when I completed my training the week of the pandemic shutdown.
Wow.
Which was very ironic.
Yeah. So I will bring you to tell us the journey, because you went through the healing journey for how many years?
This is my 9th year.
9th year. So we definitely will bring you back to share your healing journey.
Right, because you and I want to talk, Dr. Kime, about what we're doing too to help release trauma from my central nervous system.
Yes.
I think people need to know that.
Yeah, to release the emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
And we also want people to know that I found a physical therapist too,
Yes.
who would take me through all the developmental stages that I missed out on. And I would tell my physical therapist, you tell me I'm supposed to have a core. I consider it my frenemy. I know I'm to have it, but I don't know what the hell it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I found 2 amazing women who took me through all the developmental stages that I missed out on. So yay for them.
Awesome. So tell me, how could our audience to connect with you?
Well, we are setting up something called closetgirl.us.
Okay, can you spell it out?
Yes, closetgirl.us. But I also want people to contact me at my email, capital P, capital L, capital N, lowercase IEMAN 310 @gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're so welcome. Together we're going to challenge the medical system, and we're going to challenge everybody to live the best life they can. Find the appropriate health care that will help you thrive, no matter how difficult it is. We want to keep charging forward.
Yes.
And we do this, and I carry in my memory 2 women who did not make it. One was assaulted in the U.S. Army. The other was viciously assaulted as a child. These 2 women did not make it. They did not know to do what I do. And I carry their memory forever. And I dedicate a lot of what I do to not only that little girl raised in the closet, but to those 2 women, because I knew them. They crossed my path.
Yeah.
But we lost them.
Yeah. So we're going to hear more of your story in a later episode. So
That'll be wonderful. And we can go into more detail about the various treatments I've been through.
yes. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.